leave right now.
Well, thank you for staying, I would say.
Really brilliant work. So, my inclination is just to open it straight out to the audience because I could ask various questions, but actually they'll probably ask much better ones than me. So let's just kick off. Who wants to start us off with a question?
Yeah, I've got one. I presume the production of this film means that it was substantially made before Trump was re-elected, and it seems to me his hegemony has turbocharged this point about extractivism beyond anything that we could have expected with what's happened with Maduro, with what they're talking about in Iran, and so on. So I wonder where you sit now on the scale of hope or optimism or positivity, given what Bregman was talking about.
I think the film is more needed now than ever in many ways, and it's true. This film was released a few years ago, and of a lot of different reasons it came late to this country, but it's been around the world. But when Sarah Chase talks about the kleptocratic network, some people thought she was a bit too radical. But now when we have the Epstein affair, with Mandelson and Norwegian social democratic prime ministers and progressive people also caught in that. So it's obviously the kleptocratic network is there, and it's very visible. It's even more visible now than before. So I think the film plays well in that sense, and I still think hope is an act of resistance, and we need that. So.
And I think it's a very pertinent question. And I do feel there's a kind of accelerationism when it comes to oligarchic power, that oligarchic power establishes itself in one generation, that then gives the impetus for even greater power in the next, and on it goes. It's equivalent to and overlaps with Thomas Piketty's concept of the patrimonial spiral of wealth accumulation, whereby your assets accumulate at a faster rate than the consumer price index or the rate of inflation, and so those who own assets just become richer and richer and richer until something comes along to stop them. And the obvious thing which stops that spiral is very high rates of taxation. And a lot of people say, well, wealth taxes aren't going to raise that much money, so we shouldn't have them. I said, no, you're missing the whole point of what a wealth tax is for. Sure, it might raise a bit of money, but that's entirely a secondary concern. The primary concern is to bring those bastards down a peg. It's to prevent them from tearing away from the rest of us, becoming more powerful than the entirety of society put together. In order to stop that from happening, we have to levy punitive rates of taxation against them, like Britain did in the 1940s when the top rate of income tax was 98%. Between 1941 and 1952, it stayed at 98%. There was a 100% tax on luxury goods. There are all these ways of making society more equal, of ensuring that we remained roughly a democracy, at least within our own shores. We were fascists abroad, but we were social democrats at home. And that there was some sort of distribution of power as well as wealth. And taxation was seen quite overtly as a means of making that happen, but somehow we've forgotten it. Well, we haven't forgotten it. It's been knocked out of our minds by the billionaire media, by all the sorts of people that you talk about in the film.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the timing of the film. I think the conversation about taxing the rich it's much more present now than it was a few years ago. So even if we think that they are winning terrain, we are also winning terrain. I don't think it's the game is over, and I think that's really important to remember that. And I mean, if we talk about Chile, things have been lost. But I mean, yesterday it was the 8th of March, and there were millions of women out in the streets of Latin America, exactly like we saw in the film. It's the struggle is not over, and many movements are still stronger. But of course, that's also something I meet when I'm out with this film, is this kind of activist burnout, and how can we sustain ourselves and how can we support each other. This is something when I said this is a film to you, because I think we also in some way we need to preach for the choir also, we need to, because we also need these gatherings.
Yeah. And I mean, we have to support you. I mean, the first task of an activist is to look after yourself, because if you fall apart, you're of no use to anyone. Second task is to look after everyone around you, to look after each other. Then you can start looking after the planet, looking after the wider class, whatever it is that you're fighting for.
And if you feel tired, you can at least not take down the people who's trying to do something.
Yeah. Very good. Have we got a second question?
We talk about the idea of having democracy in this country. I personally don't think we do particularly. I thought the film was wonderful because it depicted change from below, which seems to me to be the only way to affect change, when we have political parties which are run by vested interests. How can we have a viable democracy when we have political parties that are dependent on corporations and billionaires? And I don't know about you, but I see young people particularly feeling quite helpless in this environment, because they can see very clearly that they cannot affect the change that they really want.
I think we need rules. I mean, I think the neoliberals always shout for less law. They don't want to have any law, and I think we need law to protect democracy, and then, of course, then campaign money and all that things. It has to be, it has to change a lot if we want to have democracy.
I mean, it is a remarkable thing, isn't it, that there is this group of oligarchs, a few hundred in number around the world, and there's some tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of concierges who support those oligarchs and deliver the services, the sort of thing that you showed so well with, the financial consultants and the wealth managers and the lawyers and the accountants and the insurers and all the rest of it. And they're all in one group, and we hate those bastards. All the polls show that people want a more equal society, that they don't want to be dominated by the Epstein class, even before it was called the Epstein class. The polls are absolutely consistent with this. Every country in the world is 80% plus of people who want to change society, that want a more equal society, both politically and economically. But almost everyone in public life sides with the oligarchs against the people, regardless of party, regardless, with one or two exceptions, of newspaper, regardless of what your platform is. And nearly everyone who is prominent in public life is with them against us. It's a quite remarkable thing. This is why protest movements are so absolutely essential, because basically that's the only democracy we get.
I think also, I mean, I'm including a fisherman in the film, who is a strategic communication man with very big success. And I think we need to understand the role of strategic communications, because the billionaires are buying that. They buy it to change legislation, but of course also to win elections and to shift the public agenda to their side. And that will also make life more difficult for progressive politicians when the agenda is moved away from or against them. So, and I think the only way to really move the agenda is with movements. You can see that in Chile, the big uprising, there was no strategic communication could fight that when it was happening big time. It happened later, because the pandemic killed off the movement a bit, and people get tired, and then they could attack with stupid things like racism or whatever. They find ways to attract it. So movements are good. But we also need to regulate strategic communications. That business is also, the lobby business is also destroying democracy.
Very true. Any questions from the balcony? You'll have to shout it out as we remember to get the. Yes, there's one right at the back. Oh yeah, there is. Mike's going, keeping going very fit.
Are you doing fine up there?
Yeah, great. Person standing up in the corner there.
Thank you.
Oh yes.
Hi. It's picking up really on the previous question a bit, but I was thinking about, okay, we get political donations, so parties get a lot of support to, or some parties get a lot of support to be able to run very high-level campaigns for their election, so giving an unfair advantage. But also that the backside of that is when they're in power, then of course they're the lobbyists in around the table, and I think the problem is, it's not only that we kind of know that now, even though it's all denied, but you see the legislation that comes out, like, for example, when new planning legislation is coming out, it's even about biodiversity net gain that's become just an add-on rather than actually really central to good planning. And I think it's a culture now that almost people sort of have kind of given up on some of that. Don't feel, what's the point of, participating in public consultation, because they'll ignore it anyway. That's just a token gesture rather than actually something fundamentally happening. And it feels that, I think, so even now very disappointed with the Labour Party because they had high hopes of relatively good standards. And it doesn't, I mean, on the one hand, it maybe overtly, the optics being sort of good consideration. But actually, behind the scenes, there's a complete disinterest in a lot of the things that really matter to elect activists. So how do you overcome that sort of culture of complacency in a way, of just by being worn down by thinking, well, that's how we're going to really change something as fundamental as that?
It's a big question. I think, first of all, I think we need to try to stay focused and talk about things that we think is important. If it's agriculture, if it's housing, the climate, whatever we think should be the issue, we should talk about that, and don't let us fall into their, shift the focus. I think that's number one. And then you can take the next second one.
I mean, we certainly need the political side, the party political side as well, because there have to be visible alternatives. So you give the very good example of the Labour Party in this country. Quite remarkable, the polling last week showing not just that the Greens were on 21%, while Labour and the Conservatives are on 16%, an astonishing turnaround. Absolutely shattering, world-changing, nation-changing historical poll. But also that of those who voted Labour at the last election in 2024, only 37% would do so again. There's never been a collapse like that. It's quite remarkable. And what we see with this Labour Party is, a Labour Party which came from a protest movement originally, is a complete sellout to the Epstein class, where it would prefer to keep faith with that class than to keep faith with the electorate. So we could despair over that, and sure, we do despair over that. It's a pretty desperate situation. But then suddenly, boom, someone else turns up, and the Green Party has suddenly gone and filled the space that Labour used to fill. And we're seeing similarly with Zohran Mamdani in New York, who's stepping into the breach, that huge gap which the establishment Democrats have left vacant. And these opportunities, they have to be seized whenever they occur, but they're always there.
And they're also coming with a message of joy and fun, and that change is possible. I think that's really important. It's not so bitter. It's not so, they don't have to shout so loud. I think I've been following, of course, you much more, but the candidate, the Green candidate in Manchester, amazing language that would fit totally into this film, and I think that's it's really inspiring, and I think it's important for us when now we have Trump and the real madness to also focus on the good stuff that is happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we lose ourselves, and I think that's also important in relation to our kids and so on, and, to not fall into total despair.
While the mic's up the top, shall we see if someone else has got? Oh yes, you've already got it. Well done.
Very quickly, two things people can do. First of all, you can definitely keep the pressure on for electoral reform, because people are sick of voting for against something they don't want. They want to be able to vote for something they do want. And I think Gertten and Denton showed the passion for people saying, here's something I can vote for and feel good about it, and someone I can feel good about. And people want more of that. The other thing is that on March the 28th, there's a big march in London, a march for hope, a march for love, a march for optimism, and as many people as can get there as possible, please, because I think we really have to keep showing the politicians that they are not giving us what we want. And what we want is more compassion, more kindness, and more togetherness.
Great.
And this is very much the message that Rutger was putting forward in the film. And, as his research and many other researchers have shown, the great majority of people want that. We are the uber social mammal, with the possible exception of the naked mole rat. And we really have this incredible capacity for connecting with each other. And our survival in past times has been entirely dependent on our ability to connect with each other. And yet, of course, what neoliberalism does is to split us apart and box us up, to atomize and rule. And if that's what power wants, well, we do the opposite. We come together, we mobilize and resist.
And I think for me, making this film, it was really important for me to bring in those arguments, that language, because I think we also need that when we talk to each other, to understand that survival of the fittest actually means survival of the friendliest. I think it's important to don't fall into their language, because their language is cynicism and despair. We shouldn't go there, I think.
Where's my? Oh, there it is. There at the back.
Hi, I'm a local business coach and author, and my work supports the smallest enterprises, the micro solopreneur businesses. And I think that business is really getting a bad rap and has done for a very long time. And I'd be interested to hear from both of you about how you feel that business at that level can really support social activism. I do see a lot of those kinds of businesses coming together. I also know that I'm working with those businesses for a long time, that they actually pay with their taxes, so that everything has become inverted and reversed. And I'd really like to hear from both of you, so that I could sort of pass it on to those communities who feel they could be involved in social.
I think both of us are small businesses also, so we are totally in the same book. And we pay taxes. I pay taxes.
As a matter of principle, I pay my taxes, so I do feel like a fool. as someone said the other day, he said the poor and middle pay tax, the rich pay lawyers, and the very rich pay politicians.
And sadly, it's almost true.
Yeah.
But to your question, and a very important question, because of course, there are huge numbers of small business people, and a very wide range of types. There's conservatives, there's radicals, there's everyone in between. But it's an absolutely fundamental part of our economy. Small businesses are constantly at risk of being swept away by the tsunami of big business, which mops up all the resources, undercuts, manages to get special sweetheart deals with wholesalers or whatever it might be. There's always this great danger of monopoly. Political monopoly, it tends towards economic monopoly as well, and that's something which has constantly to be resisted. But the small business landscape is an absolutely essential part of community building. And one of the things which makes me very proud to live in this area is the very large number of independent businesses. And what I see in the Lentil Belt is this wonderful combination of commercial entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. And very often the two things overlapping. And of course our MP She ran a business for a long time, which was also a community hub. And it's called Social Fabric, which is a wonderful name, and ties in very well with the themes of your film. But you know, it is absolutely fundamentally important. Of course, you know, the politics can vary. We know that you know, in the 1930s, Oswald Mosley's appeal with the British Union of Fascists was to a very large extent rooted in small shopkeepers. But it doesn't have to be like that, of course, at all. But you know, in order for it not to be like that, we have to provide a politics which speaks to people, small business people, just as it does to so many others who are struggling across society.
I would say Mandani in New York started very early to talk about the mom and pop's businesses, which is also something new for a progressive politician. That normally, I mean, Labour and Sweden, the Social Democrats, always make deals with the big businesses because that's good for the country, for the, you know, the big structures. But of course, the big business will always get their legislation, get what they need, and then the small businesses are kind of left out. So I think it's also a shift in politics, and I think that's the inspiration that we should take on to also see the potential of a small business.
And there is a gap, there's no question, because, you know, Labour and the Conservatives and Reform and similar groups in every country, they're very much focused on big business. The left is generally very sceptical of small business, and it's, oh, they're the bourgeoisie, the petty bourgeoisie, and we don't want anything to do with them. And of course, we're talking about millions of people who are just dismissed, left in the cold. Well, that's not good for anyone.
Where's the mic now?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to add to the list of who the super rich pay is also newspapers and controlling social media algorithms, and they have a lot of control of the information that shapes our culture and our politics. And it isn't just the people versus the super rich, because we now have people who share many of the same grievances, but through kind of right-wing populism, the problems that they have are explained to them in a very different way. And then that turns into quite ugly forms of far-right politics. And we're seeing that as a very real form of activism in this country at the moment. So I guess is one of the challenges for progressive activism, if you want to call it that, to take on that sort of cultural information communication political challenge and actually create a kind of really intentional culture of it's the friendliest who win, and everything that goes with that philosophy. And it isn't just a kind of getting out and shouting on the streets, but actually having a purposeful cultural agenda as well to take on that sort of far right populism.
I believe that people, normal working class people or whatever we call it, are extremely stressed right now by the rising prices of everything. There is a lot of frustration out there, and the right wing has been extremely good at exploiting that stress and the frustration. And I mean, in Czech Republic now they're entered a motorist party. You know, people who are frustrated with the cars. I mean, and you can see that politics everywhere. You know, you can win votes by hating bicycles, or you know, or hating women, or whatever. You know, you find. So it's, or trans, or you know. But so I think there is certainly a challenge. I love this idea of the March of Joy, and because I don't really believe in left-wing populism either. I think that's, why should we be silly? I think we should have to stay nice in many ways. Because I don't think that.
Yeah, I mean, the far right has got this advantage that it can ride the never-ending disaster joyride. So, for instance, you know, it engineers Brexit, and you would have thought, okay, the bastards behind Brexit, we would be turning our anger on them, but instead, you know, Brexit causes unemployment, it helps to cause the cost of living crisis, all these other problems. people get angry, and when people are angry, when they feel that they're losing status, they're losing wealth, they become very susceptible to the call of the far right. Trump's attack on Iran, sending fuel prices through the roof, and all contribute to the cost of living crisis. Again, it will boost the far right. And so what we have to do and I say we, and because I actually think that anyone who opposes oligarchs is basically on the left. The right is actually a very small part of society. The rest of us are on the left. And that's how I define the left. It's basically, if you support a very small number of people having a very large amount of money, you're on the right. If you don't, you're on the left. So basically, we're all on the left, okay? So those of us on the left, as I define it, those of us in the second group, what we have to do, to a very large extent, is exposition. We have to show people, we have to demonstrate in two senses of the word. A successful demonstration is a demonstration against something, but it's also a demonstration of something. We are showing you something. And that's what is so brilliantly portrayed in the film. Because, I've been in this business for over 40 years now, but I still learned a whole load from the film. It opened my eyes to all sorts of things. A perfect demonstration, a perfect exposition of truths which we need to see and hear. And that's our secret weapon. If we can expose people to what's really going on. Have a look at this Epstein class. What they were doing to the young girls and the women, they're doing to the whole planet. It's planetary rape is what we're looking at. And to all the workers, to all the local communities, everyone is being treated the same by these people. And if you align yourself with the far right, you align yourself with those people. Which side do you want to be on?
Following on from what Sarah was talking about and from both of your replies, I think I probably want to ask about how we combat the scourge of culture wars. So what we have at the moment is a situation where people are activists or anti-establishment or progressive are being turned against each other. And a lot of that is obviously through manipulation of social media. And it seems very difficult to find a way to combat that because obviously you still think you're fighting a good fight, but you're fighting it against each other. So how do we combat that? Do we take up the same tactics of Cambridge Analytica? Do we take up the same No, I don't know. No, definitely no. I'm genuinely not a good idea. But it is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, I noticed it was with great interest. It's one of those little nuggets of facts that I sort of heard recently was that when one of the bombs, the last time that America bombed Iran, it hit a data centre, and overnight two of the most sort of proactive Scottish nationalist sites went dark, and they're both being run from Iran, which is fascinating. But how do you, that would be something which, it's a very emotional issue, obviously, which they had targeted because it was so. But how do you combat, how do you deal with things like that? I know it's a tricky question, but I was just wanting to know what you thought. Thanks.
It is a tricky question, but it's stuck in my mind is why people on the good side fight each other, and I guess that's some kind of discipline. We need to kind of find a way to say, okay, let's agree on a number of things, and we don't really disagree here, but let's go together. And I think that's kind of this kind of defining somebody wrong because of one word or one sentence. I think that's problematic.
I very much agree with that. Now, culture wars, the real words for culture war is divide and rule. That's what it's there for. That's why it's endlessly. They sort of constantly rolling grenades under our tent flats so that we fight each other, we turn each other. And you're absolutely right. We do have this tendency. It's partly that. Oh my God, the Jeff Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks and the Donald Trumps of this world are too big and too scary. But I feel really upset and aggrieved, and I need to fight someone. So I'll fight this person for saying a bad word or for just having a marginally different politics to mine, whatever it might be. and then you just get into these internecine struggles. Now, I've been involved in a few myself, I have to admit. It's easily done. You get sucked in, and the truth is that there's no movement which isn't susceptible to the far right, which isn't susceptible to being captured, and I do feel we've got a duty to keep ourselves straight. And sometimes you have to have a bit of a dust up in order to make that happen. But it has to be with that wider purpose in mind, creating a wider solidarity. Of course, you've got to be really careful with this, because it's so easy to say, well, I'm doing this for a higher purpose, baff, and you're just sort of randomly punching people. But there's sometimes you say, you were on our side, but you actually are now promoting far-right messaging, and that's not good, and that's not actually part of what this is about. Or, for instance, I love the fact that you're supporting the Palestinians, but that messaging is actually anti-Semitic, for example. So let's do it without the anti-Semitic messaging. Let's have absolutely rock-solid solidarity with the people of Gaza, but you don't have to say that extra stuff, which actually destroys our credibility and puts you on the wrong side. And so, somehow we have to maintain a kind of discipline, but without leading to fratricidal warfare. It's not easy.
No, it is not. Thinking of what is happening right here now in this room is like the community talking together. I think that is one of the answers we need, that we need to get together more. And as this was my film, and it will tour around this country, you can all help out by telling friends around that they can book the film, talk to the local cinema. You can organize another group of people who have maybe missed it. You can do more screenings. If you have any friends in London, I will be on Wednesday at Curzon Soho, where Sarah Chase from the film will be, and also Sven Hughes, the fisherman. But I think that's the challenge with the super rich and the media, is that we are also media, but we don't really have resources to reach out. So we need help from our friends. Yeah. And you are now considered friends, just so you know.
That's a terrible question. Thank you.